It's the Critics Circle with me, Charles Gross, and Leslie Hoban Blake. Tonight, an interview with Mark S. Hoebee, the artistic director of the Paper Mill Playhouse, and a review of On Beckett with Bill Irwin. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Critics Circle.
Hello, Charlie.
Hello, Leslie. How you doing?
It's getting easier because we all understand the up and down of it all and the open and close of it all. And unfortunately, it's the new normal, and here we are,
This show will have aired after Thanksgiving, and I'm hoping that by then we will have something extra special to be thankful for.
Okay, I hope the vaccine and something else, I hope. Yes, right. Okay.
Tonight, for our interview, we leave the island of Manhattan and travel to that distant land known as New Jersey. So let us begin our journey. Our guest this evening is Mark S. Hoebee. He is the artistic director of the Paper Mill Playhouse. For over 80 years, this has been the premier theater in New Jersey. Yes, Manhattan, there is some very good theater in New Jersey, and they have survived the burning down of their theater, a near bankruptcy about 13 years ago, and now, of course, we have COVID. But like with every good theater, the show goes on. Mark, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here with you both.
Welcome, Mark. One of the things we're doing with the interview series that we started with Critics Circle is to talk to existing theaters who are suddenly caught up in this theater is closed and how they're handling it. But before I ask you the question, I want to remind everyone that although Paper Mill is 80 years old, you were not there in the beginning. You came in 2000, according to Wikipedia. I just wanted to make that clear.
You are correct.
And my first question is, because Charlie brought it up, it wouldn't have been my first question, but this bankruptcy 13 years ago, that was the big 2008 fiasco that we all went through, right? Or was that a different one? My math is terrible.
No, you're right. It's an interesting story. It was a financial crisis we found ourselves in actually in 2007. We wound up about $4.5 million in debt, declining subscription. We had a lot of problems, and through some incredibly smart trustees, the support of our patrons and education parents and donors, and the Township of Millburn, we actually sold the land we owned to the Township of Millburn for about $9 million, retired all the debt, and had a little money to start over. And that's actually when I took over as the acting artistic director. I'm now the producing artistic director, but I took over in the middle of that crisis. We had about $6,000 in the bank. We had about 6,000 subscribers, down from about 40,000, and we were about ready to close our doors. So it was a major turnaround story. But the key date is we signed the papers with the township for the sale, and they floated a bond on, I think it was October 28th of 2008. And then in September was the crash.
Wow.
So had we been delayed, they say in theater, timing's everything.
Absolutely.
Had we been delayed a month, we wouldn't be here right now.
So what did you put up that season when you had all these millions of dollars to play with?
Oh, well, we didn't, because we needed that money to pay everyone. We started with, it was one of our first new shows called Happy Days, it was a musical based on the television series, written and produced by Gary Marshall, working with a very kind commercial producer in New York, Bob Boyette. That's what kicked off that season and sort of brought the theater back to life.
Now, you have been
Sorry, go ahead, Charlie.
You have been a testing ground and an opening theater for quite a few shows. I know Newsies, Bandstand, and I was happy to go see Little House on the Prairie there, which didn't make it to Broadway, but still was a very enjoyable show, and a revised Little Mermaid.
Right, yeah, we worked with Disney. We've done about 4 or 5 projects with Disney. They've been incredible. Thomas Schumacher and the entire Disney team, Jack Eldon, Ben Famigliotti, everybody there is spectacular. It actually was born out of the crisis of our 2007, 2008. When I was taking over, we needed to explore the idea of partnership. So we started partnering with other regional theaters And we also looked to New York and some connections that I had there. I started out as a dancer. I was a dancer for 10 years on Broadway. You may have seen me as the pepper shaker in Beauty and the Beast.
And you were also in Sweet Charity, directed by Bob Fosse.
That's correct. I did the national tour of Sweet Charity with Bob Fosse and Gwen Verdon and Donna McKechnie. And I did about 10 national tours and Broadway shows and made a lot of connections with producers there and started courting them for relationships for new projects. And Paper Mill, before, like in the 80s, no one wanted to bring a new project to Paper Mill. They thought we were too close to New York. You needed to get out of town. But with the advent of cell phones and the internet, there's no escaping the critical eye. You can't go out of town anymore. Everybody can find you. So we started these partnerships. Happy Days was the first one. Then we worked with Cameron McIntosh, launching the 25th anniversary production of Les Mis, which toured after Paper Mill for 4 years and wound up in New York. We did Newsies. That was the biggie, partnering with Disney on Newsies that started here, moved into Manhattan, ran for 2 years, then a national tour, digital capture. But we have had some great success. Honeymoon in Vegas moved to New York, Bandstand, right. A Bronx Tale, which we did with Alan Menken and Chaz Palminteri and Jerry Zaks. Hunchback of Notre Dame, which was another Disney project, which was a collaboration between Disney Theatrical, Paper Mill, and La Jolla Playhouse. That one, again, didn't make it to New York, but is enjoying huge success all around the world. And Charles, you're right, we premiered the new version of A Little Mermaid with Disney. They rewrote it after it ran in New York and after a couple of international productions, and we premiered the new version of that here. So we've been very lucky to partner with some great.
How intriguing for them to do that, because Charles came back and told us how wonderful it was. And then the reviewers also said, hey, it was better than the one on Broadway. So, well, I mean, it's not often that the big guys like Disney are going to come back and say, you know what, we can make that better.
I think that's what makes the good guys great guys, right? They see a project, they know it's good, and they can admit, maybe we didn't get it right. So they went back in and looked at it. You know, Little Mermaid didn't have an out-of-town tryout. It opened right in New York. That's very tough for any musical. So they wanted to look at it again. And they had done a production overseas, and then they came here. And I don't know if you saw the original production in New York, but the swimming was done on roller skates, on Heelys.
I know. It drove me crazy. I know.
The interesting thing is, I did see it. I reviewed it. And I don't know why, but I got more comments on that review. And it was a moderate review, nothing, outlandish in either direction. And I got almost death threats over it. There is definitely a passion about the Little Mermaid. Although I have to say, the roller skates was a good intention, but I think using the wiring, having them actually swim, even if you did have to forego the clamshell bra, was definitely the way to go.
Yeah, Glenn Casal directed that for us, and he had experimented with the flying. It was a very complicated computerized flying system that combined, I think there were 4 or 5 different ways that the actors flew, and then it was lit beautifully by Charlie Morrison, and you really could not see, if you were sitting even 3 rows back, how they were swimming. They literally looked like they were swimming. And I do think you're right. I think people, first of all, Alan Menken, just in love with that man and his music, and that animated feature and even the score for the Broadway production are so wonderful and beloved that I think people wanted that show to succeed. And that new version is being done all over the place now. It's spectacular.
I'm not sure if it was the film of Little Mermaid or Beauty and the Beast, which was also Alan Menken, but Frank Rich, who at the time was the chief theater critic of the time, said, this movie is the best Broadway musical we've seen this year.
Oh.
I just wanted to say that you said that now I can't remember exactly what you said just now about wanting the show to be, the idea of wanting the show to be a success. I wanted Bandstand to be a success. I loved that show. I don't know what I responded to in it the way I did, but I really responded to that show. And I just thought it was, and Laura Osnes, I mean, I just thought it was a wonderful, wonderful concept.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just wanted to say that.
Oh, thank you. It was one of my favorites too. It was Laura Austin as Corey Cott, Beth Level. I mean, amazing company.
Beth lives in my building. I know her. Yes.
Oh, we
Yeah,
love
really.
her. And another pair of terrific commercial producers, Tom Smeeds and Gabby Palis. The thing that I think that was so special about that show, a couple things. It was completely original, right? It was a story that felt familiar to us because it was about real life events, but completely out of the heads of the authors, Rob Taylor and Richard Oberacher. But it dealt with a theme that I had never seen done on stage before, and certainly not in a musical, which was post-traumatic stress disorder, and how those veterans, how all veterans pretty much, are asked to just reassimilate into society and forget what happened and how your life was changed by living through a war. And the bond that those guys created by forming their band and succeeding in their own way was really, really unique. And the key to it too was, first of all, Andy Blankenbuehler and his amazing staging and choreography. He's a genius, right? But the fact that those men who played those, embodied
Right.
those veterans so believably, also played that music.
Right.
They were not miming along or faking it. They
Right.
were real, serious musicians. And I think you could feel that. I
But
think,
it was serious. It was a serious musical. We get them every now and then,
yeah,
but it was topical, even though it was about a different war.
right.
And the other thing is that if it were a Hollywood movie, and there were Hollywood movies that use that trope, the end would have been them putting the band together. That would have been a big band number, and then the end would come out and everybody would dance, right? So that was like the middle. That was not the end of that. That went on. I didn't mean to take so much time on this, but I really love that play.
No, I love it
And
too.
thank you
I think
for
it was,
taking a chance on it.
yeah, I think it was swallowed up because it opened in that season, and it opened late in the Broadway season when there were like 13 new musicals. Had it opened in a different season, I think it probably would have gotten more acclaim. But they did capture it for a digital capture, which was in the movie theaters, and it did a national tour. So,
I think someday it will come back to Broadway. This, I should point out, there was an original score that they were playing. These weren't just old retreads. A very strong score.
Which had the sound of the original without being the original, and without being a parody. It was wonderful. But you just said something, Charlie, and I have to take you on this. It will come back to Broadway. Those are deep words right now. We don't know if there will be, when there will be, no matter what they put on the front page of, Variety or any of those, whatever it's going to be is when it's going to be. So here's the question for you. How are you keeping Paper Mill afloat right now? And because all the theaters are figuring out ways of doing things and, this, that, and the other. What is your this, that, and the other? Because,
Sure. Well, I'll tell you, like everybody else, we had to end our season early. We lost I think it was about $4 million in ticket income and had to cancel our gala. We wound up laying off about 30% of the staff, but we immediately pivoted and put all of our education programs online. They were very successful. We've doubled our goals of enrollment in education online in our fall session, but they've been running since April. And we are now educating kids in Canada, in 10 states, Montana, California, North Carolina, because everything's online. So our reach has gone very far. We always thought we had a good reputation. We certainly didn't sell this idea of taking paper mill education classes. Those students found us, which was thrilling. And then we've moved, like most people have, to a digital season for this year. We started off with 3 concerts. Patti LuPone did one, Laura Benanti did one 2 weeks ago, and coming up, Vanessa Williams is doing one. And then we're producing 4 shows on our own, on stage at Paper Mill, captured live, honoring all safety protocols and COVID testing and all of those crazy things, but with no audience, filmed, and then edited and streamed to our subscription.
I'm very excited about the Christmas Carol that Jefferson Mays is going to do,
Yeah.
a la Patrick Stewart and a la Dickens himself, doing that kind of thing. But what are the other four? What are the other three? That's one.
Well, that's one. That actually is one that we're working with the producer in New York, Hunter Arnold. But the ones we're producing ourselves it's called Sing in a New Year. It's a holiday cabaret with 14 of Paper Mill's favorite performers that will sing holiday music. We're doing a show called Some Enchanted Evening, which is 5 singers and all of Rodgers and Hammerstein's most beautiful music. We're doing a show called Pete and Keeley, which was a huge off-Broadway success.
I saw it. Yeah.
Really funny and lovely, sort of a takeoff on Stephen Eady. And then we're ending our season, and depending on how the numbers go and health-wise, we might be able to invite a limited audience in June at the end of our season. We're celebrating the women of the 60s with Beehive. So, the musical tribute to all the girl groups.
Right. That's a great.
That's a fun show.
Yeah.
Well, that's a full season. So was that originally your season, or is that what you changed
No.
it to?
None of those shows were in our
What
season.
did we miss out on, or would you rather not talk about that?
No, I don't care. We were going to launch a new Disney project. Disney was working with us on a new version of Aida. It was going to be a national tour with an all African-American company to honor the way that the original material sourced from. But that was canceled because all tours were canceled. So that's pushed off. We were going to do a new show called Bruce, which is based on the Jaws log, which is the making of the movie of Jaws. It's not a musical of Jaws. It's a musical of the making of Jaws. Very clever, very funny. And Bruce is actually what the Mechanical Shark's name was, because it was such a diva and a problematic star that when they were trying to name it, I can't remember, the author said, why don't you name it after the only shark I know, my lawyer, Bruce.
I think
so they named it Bruce.
Peter Benchley, wasn't it? Peter Benchley?
Peter Benchley, yes.
Well, I think what...
Oh, and then the other show we were going to do was The Wanderer, which is a brand new musical based on Dion from Dion and the Belmonts.
Oh.
So we've moved that forward, though. We're going to do that and probably Bruce in our 21-22 season. Yeah.
Okay.
When you collaborate with a Broadway producer or with Disney, how do you divide the work?
Well, they're all different. Every relationship is different. So let's talk about any project. The commercial producer, whether it's Disney or Tom Smeeds or Jill Menza, they own a product. It's a brand new musical that we can't get the rights to, right? They own it. So let's talk about The Wanderer. It's a brand new musical that we saw in a workshop. They're looking for a major regional theater to do a production before it's ready for New York. We get together, we talk about it. We love it artistically. Then we meet and talk about how Paper Mill could serve their needs. Then it comes down to the budget, right? We draw up a budget about what's needed to realize the production on stage, how much rehearsal, how big the set will be, all of those many, many things. And then we divide that up. This is going to be the commercial producer's portion. This is going to be Paper Mill's portion. And then if everybody agrees, we go to a contract. And then the work really falls on Paper Mill. We are the producers. The commercial producers are the enhancement entity. So Paper Mill does all the contracting. We rehearse, we build the sets under the supervision of the commercial producer, working together all the time. But it is a Paper Mill production. Working under our contracts, our union rules, and realized on our stage. And then when it's over, the commercial producer takes with them all the assets, right? The musical scores, the set, the costumes, the props, it all goes out the door along with them, but our name's attached to it because we're one of the original investors. We put in over $1 million in these shows. And then the upside is, if it's successful, like many of them have been, Newsies, Hunchback, even Bandstand with its tour and digital capture, brings royalties back to the theater after, on its long life.
So they're so lucky to have found you, Mark, really.
Well, I am lucky to be here. I actually danced in the chorus of Oklahoma way, way back, then came back as a director, directed a big revival of Dreamgirls, and eventually joined the staff. So I grew up in New Jersey. So Paper Mill is my hometown theater, and I love it.
You had mentioned your scholastic program. I just have to say a word about probably your most famous alumnus, and that would be Anne Hathaway.
Right. She is, yes. Anne Hathaway started here. She was a high school student. She was in our education programs. She, in one of our children's touring production, she actually played, I believe she played Jafar in a children's musical version of Aladdin. Appeared on stage in a few of our shows and main stage as well. And then, went on to become an Academy Award-winning actress. She's been very kind in her support of Paper Mill and in always mentioning how she got her love and her early training right here in Millburn, New Jersey. And
maybe that's why people all over the place were coming to find you. You don't know.
Yeah, we're very grateful to her, and we consider her family, and she's very, very lovely.
Okay. Well, Mark, we certainly look forward to your streaming productions, and we certainly look forward to actually being back in the theater itself, hopefully, sooner rather than later. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good day.
So much. So lovely to meet you. What a lovely man, and what a lovely theater. Got a lot going on. I'm so excited about that school project.
Yes. Well, they've been doing that for a long time. And
Not on the ground.
No,
not
on this scale. Certainly not on this scale.
Well,
Moving on.
Okay, sorry. We're now moving back to another favorite theater of ours, the Irish Rep, and a favorite artist of ours, Bill Irwin, who has re-put on the show that he did 2 years ago, called On Beckett, but now it's On Beckett on Screen is the title of the show. And he redid it. It's not as if this is the same show. It's the same show, but I mean, he didn't just tape the show that he did. He actually comes on stage. He says, I'm here. This is a terrible time. He shows the empty theater. And so he's talking to us, and he's talking us through it. I found this very moving this time. It's excerpts from short writings of Beckett, and pieces of well-known pieces of Beckett, like Endgame or Waiting for Godot. And there's a long discussion of Godot,
Right.
and he goes into that.
Well, he's been in several versions of them, and that is one of the focuses of the evening. He spends a good amount of time on Godot and explaining why he thinks it should be called Godot.
Well, he became an aficionado of Godot, as did Nathan Lane. They were not originally Godot people. They were Godot people. They changed over time. It's funny in itself. But this is not a funny evening. That first hour became so serious and so dark. I think because of what's going on and because of the way he was presenting it. And it's the same material that I saw before, but with what's happened in our lives, and because Beckett is a writer into the abyss, and always was a writer into the abyss, suddenly I'm going, I need respite from this, and that's exactly the point at exactly the 1 hour mark that Bill says it's time to put on the baggy pants. And for the last half hour, he gives us the baggy pants, and that is to say, he gives us the vaudeville side of Beckett, because after all, Waiting for Godot is considered his comedy, even though some people consider it, not only a tragedy, but dark,
Sure. Well, plus, Bill Irwin is the clown prince of Broadway. And he says right out, this is coming from a clown's point of view. And the ironic thing is, Bill was known for so many years, for his silent work, one of the few silent comedians that we have today. So he puts on the baggy pants, and he goes into a whole dissertation of hats, mainly derbies, but also top hats. And I have to say, some comedians, silent comedians like Chaplin will use a derby, Laurel and Hardy. Some like Harpo Marx will use a top hat. Bill Irwin is the only one I know who manages to make both of them work. And he is the lovable clown. He's like a modern day Harpo Marx in many ways. And when I saw this on stage, I loved it. I'm not a big Beckett fan, but I am a huge Bill Irwin fan. And just seeing him talking about Beckett, doing the shtick, I loved it. But in this particular instance, I actually had a reaction similar to the one that you had when we spoke about what the Constitution means to me. In my case, it just did not translate. And I'm not complaining that the production should have been more elaborate or anything like that. It just, for me, it wasn't coming through. It lost something in the translation, and I didn't enjoy it anywhere nearly as much as I did when I saw it on stage.
You know what? I think something is happening here. As critics, we should be aware of this. This is a new medium, and our expectations of what we want to see, and that's what I said about Constitution, was that my expectation, and especially as a director myself, I'm in there in my head directing it, and I shouldn't be. The only thing that bothered me about this one was when they did some waist shots when I know his legs were doing things, and I wanted to see the whole thing. But that's like filming Fred Astaire. You had to film Fred Astaire from his head to his feet. You couldn't film his shoulders because so there are a lot of long shots which are necessary to show you what he's actually doing. And I realized we almost have to approach this. I mean, I know that Constitution was a film. I know that this was made for us. And that's what I found happening. He spoke. He took us out of the piece that it was. He made it a brand new piece. That's the difference between this and the Constitution. And so he brought us in, and he talked about the pandemic, and he made it very, very visceral, so that I was moved. I was upset.
Your conclusion?
My conclusion is that this was brilliant, that it was a brilliant idea for him to redo it. I know it would have been easier just to take a previously taped version and show it. And it's not a film. It's a specific, theater piece. He talks about when the theaters come back, if the theaters come back. Right. He is a light on the stage.
I agree with everything you have said about Bill Irwin. He is one of the most beloved performers, one of the most talented and versatile. And as I said, loved it on stage. To me, the translation simply did not work. I'm glad it's there. I'm glad he did this. I'm glad we will always have it. But I have to say I was disappointed. And
well, it's funny. We switched positions. It is
indeed,
very funny.
Indeed.
I think we have to work on how we see this, how we see this new medium.
Absolutely. And that is our show for this evening. And Leslie and I will see you
in the Critics Circle.
You're my lucky charm. Roll 'em. Use that lucky, amazing arm. Roll 'em. Go for broke, kid. Let's bet the farm. Roll 'em down the aisle. Making Sonny smile and looking good.
Boy, right there. I see him.